Okay, so I decided to take everything that we've done up to now and tie it all together. Now, so we've been talking a lot about nulls, and we haven't touched yet on blooms, but I figure I'll integrate all of that stuff into what we've been talking about. We're talking about adult learning, pedagogy, and all that stuff. And so that's what this unfilled in picture up here is for. All right? I went through everything that we've talked about, and I created this blank mind map for you guys all to fill in on your own. Yeah, I know. All right. So, where did we start? Where did we start off? Well, we started off when we started off in week 1, we started talking about our institution here. Number 1, the fact that we are suffering like most other institutions, retention. All right? But our issue, more than others, is that we have primarily what kind of students? What do we call our students? Non-traditional, at-risk students. All right? So that's going to require a lot more work of us. So we started off and we started talking about learning theories, and more specifically, adult learning theories. All right, and if you remember back, we determined that, well, we didn't determine, all right, but there are 3. And what were those 3 adult learning theories that we discussed? What's the big one? The word that we now use instead of the other word? Andragogy. All right, so that was number 1. And what were the other 2? What were the other 2?
I don't remember the actual words, but one was model of teaching at people, and the other one was a model of encouraging learning.
Teaching at people.
Yeah, teaching, and then the opposite is the learning, ensuring learning gets done.
Well, no, that was a discussion between educating, teaching versus learning.
Right.
But there were 2 other. One was
There was the one where they direct themselves.
yes, and that's exactly what it's called, self-directed. Now, it just so happens that in addition to andragogy and pedagogy, there's a word for this too, which I just found out today.
It would be auto.
No, it actually is called hodagogy, if that's how you pronounce it. H-U. H-E-U. Which is management of self-directed learning. All right? Hudagogy, hodagogy, whatever else. And then the third one was transformational. And what was that transformational learning?
It will change their lives.
Say again?
It will change their lives. It will change their lives.
Yes. So for instance, the example given was when you learn a new language, all right, you now learn and you feel more about that individual culture. All right, so those were our 3 different learning, all right, types. Now, learning theories, but now we have adult learning methods. And what were those? Here we're talking about how adults learn. Auditory.
Visual and written.
Tactile.
Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic.
Yes.
And if you only provide visual cues, all right, how much learning occurs there? You remember those statistics? 10%. All right? If you provide both visual and auditory, then 30 to 40%. And if we add all 3, then we're talking 90%. All right? So it behooves you, like we mentioned before, it behooves you to attempt to use all three, but in most cases, in a lot of cases, unless you're in something technical like, let's say, cybersecurity or game design or graphics, it may be hard to do this. You know, it's kind of hard to do kinesthetic in American history. All right? But as often as you can, you should try to hit all three. All right, we with me so far? All right, and you don't have to, what I'll do is I'll go find some piece of software, I'll task Lydia to make up a mind map of all of this stuff, so we'll have it, all right? I won't task her, I'll ask her, all right? Now, okay, so now, all right, so now let's go to, talk about some andragogy. All right, now, and again, andragogy was Bloom's, and he had some assumptions. That he based adult learning on. And what were those assumptions? When adults come to school, what do they bring?
Experience.
They bring experience, they bring life experiences. Why are adults returning to school?
For advancement?
For advancement, life change, all right, they're internally motivated, all right, things like that. So out of that then, what did we need to do? Based on those assumptions, all right, what do we need to do to satisfy those assumptions?
We have to be flexible.
We have to be flexible, so we have to have a, let's say we have to have a cooperative and a collaborative environment. All right? What else do we have to do? How are we going to see if they're learning? Say it, say it, say it.
Assess them.
Yes, we have to do some sort of assessment. And then, as we'll tie it later to Bloom's, what it said that you should provide activities that are sequential in nature that are going to meet objectives. All right? So we'll just call that sequential activities. All right, so the two most important points here are assessment, and what do we call providing those those sequential activities in support of learning? What do we call that? What do we call that?
So that's scaffolding.
Scaffolding. It's exactly, that's scaffolding.
Must be done.
All right? So we have to provide assessment because that's going to tell us if our adults are learning, all right? Because if they're not, they're just going to walk out the door. All right? And we need to provide some sequential activities, some sequential learning, all right, to take them from some lower level up to some higher level. All right, now what's going to help us do that? Well, we got this thing down here called Bloom's taxonomy. All right, Bloom's taxonomy. Now, we've heard a lot about this, all right, but I think most of the time in the previous learning, we focused on the old, all right, vice the revised, which we'll talk about here in a minute. All right? But Bloom said that there were three domains of learning. All right? He defined three domains of learning. One was the cognitive domain. And what do I mean by the cognitive domain?
Knowledge base?
Yes, knowledge base, stuff that you know, stuff the teacher's going to sit up there at the podium and he's going to read out of his PowerPoint slides or whatever. All right, he's just going to give you pure knowledge. All right. There was also the attitudinal domain. All right, and actually he more called that the affective domain. then the third one was the behavioral domain. And basically, he says that in any learning episode, all right, you must touch at least one of these domains. All right? You must either provide knowledge, you must influence self-awareness, or you must provide a new skill. All right? Does that make sense? And so again, this kind of ties along with this. If I emphasize my training more, if I provide all of this, but if I lean more heavily on this, that individual is going to learn more. So if I'm doing a lot of lecturing and very little of this, I should do a lot of this and less of this. Okay? All right, and so that's what this is. This arrow is down here. Less and more. I should have had more than one color. This works for now. All right, so now, what's going to provide us both of this? Well, that's what Bloom's taxonomy. All right, but now, in most of the literature you'll see, we only ever address the cognitive domain, all right? And they discussed that when Bloom's taxonomy was written, there was really there weren't a lot of, let's say, vocational schools or anything out there, all right? So that's why you never see this really discussed. There have been some developed, but in every piece of literature or assessment, you'll only see discussed this cognitive domain. All right? Does anybody from last year remember all of the levels?
1 through 6.
Yeah, 1 through 6. All right, so let's start out from the bottom. What do we have at the bottom? Now, one thing I will tell you, that in the old, these were all nouns. All right?
Knowledge,
They revised them to verbs. All right, so yes, the first one was knowledge. All right? Second one.
comprehension.
Where are you reading from?
Your handout.
Yeah. Okay, so knowledge, comprehension. All right, read them off.
Application.
Application.
Analysis.
Wait, hold up.
Oh, okay.
Analysis,
Synthesis
synthesis,
and evaluation.
and evaluation. All right, now, what did I mean, knowledge? Well, that's the obvious one, so I'm going to answer that one because I don't want to do any work. Knowledge, that means I just tell you something and you can recall those facts. I give you a test and I say, all right, match these items against these items. All right? Or I give you a multiple guess exam. Well, that's not really here, but that's what some people think. All right? Comprehension. I've taken you to the higher level, so now just instead of telling me why 1 + 1 is 2, you understand why 1 + 1 is 2. Well, you don't really, because there's no such thing as understanding math. It's pure rote memorization. But now you understand a concept. Not only can you say it back, but you understand. Application. What is that?
Means you can actually do the task, you can do the math.
Solving problem.
So, yeah, so I can take what I've learned, and now that I understand it, I can apply it in the real world to some other instance, in another context. Analysis. Analysis.
You can maybe correct an error and see what's wrong.
Because I can now I have the whole piece of the puzzle. All right, I can look at something and I can see where something has gone wrong. I can break it down into component pieces and everything else. Synthesis,
Would that be applying it to a different topic?
that could be applying it to a different topic, all right, a different environment, all right?
Taking what you know and creating something new.
And
or-
taking what I know, creating something new, and then evaluation, all right? Someone can provide me an instance of something, and based on my knowledge, comprehension, understanding, I can analyze that, and I can provide an evaluation and feedback. The revised, later on it was revised, all right? Because, again, here, these are not as easily discernible unless I turn them into verbs. So if I take knowledge and say, understand, all right? Or actually,
Remembering.
remembering. All right? Now, that says, okay, someone has told me something, and I can repeat it back to them. All right? I change comprehension into understanding. All right? It's a little bit more easy to decipher. Application is kind of the same thing, except now I'm applying. Analysis, analyzing. Now, you notice the arrows here. When it was revised, these two were swapped. All right, so in the revised version of Bloom's technology, evaluation goes up here and is called evaluating. Yeah, that's ing. All right, and synthesizing becomes creating. All right. And it actually makes it a little bit easier to understand. All right. First, I remember a fact. All right. Now, once I remember a fact, I can work towards understanding it. Once I understand it, I can apply it in another situation. When I see that same knowledge, all right, someplace else, I can analyze it, or I can break down, all right, a component and analyze it based on an understanding of everything that goes into that component. All right, I can evaluate another instance of that component, all right, and then I can go on and build my own. Questions so far? Now I have this basic knowledge. What am I going to do with it? All right? Well, what's the overall end goal? We have to provide, in order to determine whether our users are learning and to instill learning, number one, we have to scaffold, which this provides us. All right? As we're building a curriculum, all we need to do is base our curriculum on this model. And how are we going to know if we're successful at each one of these stages? We're going to assess. Now, what is our assessment based upon? We talked about it before. Where does assessment start? What do we need before we can assess?
Learning outcomes?
Before that,
Programmatic outcomes.
before that,
Institutional outcomes.
before that,
A goal.
Mission.
a mission.
Statement.
That's why, can't you tell by the way that drawing is up there? Come on now. We need a mission. And then from there, we get our ILOs, PLOs, and CLOs. All right? And we use all of these in our assessment, because we not only assess here, but we assess the entire thing. We assess here during, whenever we teach a course, conduct a course, all right? We assess here periodically, we're supposed to once a year doing our program review, and then everyone is involved in this. Not only academics, but administration and management. And then finally, if we do all of this stuff right, what do we got? Now, if you Google integration, mind map integration of Bloom and Bloom and Knowles, all right? You won't find anything. So this is trademark. Now you got it.
Nice.
Put the, put the TM up there.
All right? And so I went through this entire process.
For this
All right.
lecture.
No, for this
No.
for this first 5 weeks. Because when I started, I didn't know. I'd never heard of this word before. All right? And I had never really studied this stuff. All right, well, again, we've all heard of Bloom's, but we've only heard of discussions of the cognitive domain, not the rest of this stuff. So I pieced all of that stuff together, analyzed it, and then I created this.
Good job, Bill.
All right?
It's a good lecture.
Now we just have to take this and do this. All right? And so in the next few weeks, we'll go over, all right, the beginning 4 weeks were more towards this side, and now we're gonna be going more towards this side. Question?